Greetings. Let's talk. This is a video that I really should have made a year ago, but I didn't. Why didn't I? Because I didn't think it needed to be made, and I was wrong about that. And if I'm being honest with myself, I'll probably need to republish this video in a year. Now, what video am I talking about? And that's how lists work. What's a list? How tournaments work. Let's just start off with tournaments are the martial contests that we use to decide victors in single combat, generally speaking. They take place on a list field, and the fights, the individual fights, are called lists. Does everyone call them that? No. Is every field called a list field? No. Is every field called a tournament field? Also no. I am going to use the phrase list field and lists, and occasionally tournament. If you're outside of Anstiura, even if you're inside Anstiura, there is an outstandingly high likelihood that how your group refers to a tournament or a list, the balance of words and what words you use will be different. So rather than constantly flip between words and make this more confusing, I'm just going to let you know this is what I'm going to use, and if you hear something different, try and adjust. So tournaments are a big deal in the SCA. They literally date back to the first SCA event. The first ever SCA event had what we today would consider a heavy weapons tournament, a chivalric tournament. We have, in Anstiora and in most kingdoms that I'm aware of, the heavy weapons champion is one of the oldest traditions in the SCA. Each group, for the longest time, it's not universal, but it was kind of expected, at least on Anstiora, that every group would have a heavy weapons champion, and then later, as rapier came on the scene, you'd have a rapier champion. And that, of course, is expanded to all the martial fields. We have groups now that do thrown weapons champions, target archery champions, and these are all decided through contests. And for anything where you have person-on-person contact, where you have a single combat, the list field is the place where those fights take place. The either single or elimination or Swiss 5 or the tournament is the format where we decide those victors. If you've been to any SCA events, you've either seen or heard of a tournament. You have some idea that they take place. You probably have a really good idea of how important they are. The crowns of every kingdom are decided by a tournament. So it's a big deal. But how do they work? What are the gears that turn to make these events happen? Now, I'm going to base what I'm about to say on my experiences in the SCA. Are there exceptions to what I'm about to tell you? Yes, there are, and I've probably seen a bunch of them. Is there nuance to this conversation? Again, also yes. That is not to say that what I'm going to tell you is wrong. It's that what I'm going to tell you has a lot of flexibility in it, and that flexibility is heavily and directly influenced by interkingdom anthropology, the difference between kingdoms, the difference between regions or even groups. So I'm going to give you the base building blocks, and when you go to your next event or your next meeting or your next practice and you talk about the upcoming tournament or what the next tournament you're going to fight in or you're going to watch, hopefully this will give you a metric, a framework of to ask more questions and learn more. So let's just start with the obvious. Tournaments have a tournament field. And that may sound obvious, but there's a couple of things about the tournament field you need to understand. First of all, by the SCA rules for safety, the tournament field is an exclusive zone that only fighters and marshals can enter when there is active combat. It is very important that the tournament field be well defined and be monitored by marshals. Now, the marshals are not referees. A referee actively engages participants in a sport and will enforce the rules. The marshals, their sole purpose is safety. They do not call shots. The marshals are there to make sure the fighters in the audience don't cross paths when someone's swinging a sword. Some list fields are broken up by or marked off by rope barriers. Sometimes it is more simply chalk or dirt outline on the ground. Sometimes it's actually marked off by obstacles. There are sometimes barrier fights where people fight across a sawhorse or a hay bale wall or across a bridge, which is a plank of wood on the ground. And that's kind of self-contained because if the fighter steps away from any of those obstacles, they're out of play. That way you don't have to have a perimeter, just everyone understands to stay about 18 to 20 feet or whatever away from the obstacle. But the point is that where you are having the fighting is a monitored space where non-fighters cannot go for obvious reasons. We don't want people getting killed. And let's be absolutely fair. If you've never fought before, you've never been in armor, SCA heavy weapons deliver sufficient energy on impact that if you were to take a headshot with one of these things, if you were to accidentally stray into a hot battle and one of these guys clipped you, there is more than enough force on a bastard sword or a glaive or even a single sword if the right guy's swinging it to shatter bone. And if it hits your skull, the possibility of life-altering or even life-ending injuries is not small there. So this is a full-speed, full-contact sport that we have done safely for over half a century, and we want to continue doing safely for the next half century or more. And that is why the list field is going to be some sort of well-denoted and monitored space. Now, okay, we have a space. What keeps this from turning into a barroom brawl? Well, a couple of things. First of all, like I said, you have the marshals. And like I said, the marshals are there for safety. In Otstiora, the tradition is 2 marshals per field. That way, they're much more likely to be able to duck in between the fighters and the audience if necessary. But you can have 1 marshal per field. There's nothing requiring it to be that number. The other thing you have, and this is kind of little known, they're not loud, no one notices them, are the list masters. Now, when I say list master, that's a new term. We used to call them list mistresses. Pause, let me give you a little bit of history here. The list coordinator is what I'm really talking about. Today we call them list masters. Honestly, I think list coordinator is a better term for it, but these are the people who collect the name of all the fighters. And then they use a lot of sorting techniques, but they use sorting techniques to organize these fighters, who is fighting who for the first round. And then they match up the pairings. And there are different ways of doing this, but their job is to decide who's fighting who, and then to make sure that information is given out to the fighters. We'll get to that in a second. And then when the winners are recorded, they're the ones that record wins and losses, so that when you get round 2 comes around, they know who to sort with who based on who has wins and who has losses, because the ultimate purpose of this is to come up with 1 winner usually. List coordination. Now, why do we call it list master, and why did we used to call it list mistress? For the longest time when I first started playing, most of the people that coordinated lists were women. A not small fraction of them were usually the partners of some of the fighters. And the most common site for list coordinators or list masters was for 1 or 2 women to be sitting at a table just offset from the field with some papers and a couple of pens and some note cards, taking notes, first taking a list of the fighters and then tracking who wins and loses. And that led to the term list mistress, the mistress of the list, which is a perfectly acceptable descriptor of what was the most common scenario at the time. Did men coordinate lists? Yes, there were men who did it. There were a number of very prominent men who stepped in and coordinated lists. But the overwhelming majority were women. So we called them list mistresses, and we would put up signs saying list mistress, and we would request sign-ups to coordinate those, like, we need list mistresses for. We finally have gotten away from that. And I say finally have gotten away from it for 2 reasons. One, when you say list mistress, in a room full of people, half of whom are new, you are almost explicitly excluding the men from that. And like I said, we've had plenty of male list coordinators. So the term, it hurts us when we're trying to get volunteers. But also, the role is not gendered. There's never been any official or even unofficial preference that I've ever seen saying that only one gender or another should coordinate these lists. Excuse me. Like I said, we've certainly had lots of averages, but there's never been any rule or reason or even suggestion that only women should coordinate lists. So we finally call them now list masters or list coordinators. I think a lot of people decided that list master sounds more medieval. I'm kind of sketchy on that myself. List coordinator is a perfectly acceptable term as well. But your list master, they are the ones that they take all the names for sign up, they're the ones that sort them out, and they're the ones that are going to match up all the pairings for each round. Now, what happens to those pairings? Well, this gets to the next part. You have the heralds. And obviously that's close to my heart. I cut my teeth list heralding. It was my first introduction to SCA voice heralding, and it's something I did for years and still occasionally do step into the role. The heralds serve a couple of really important functions in the tournament. First of all, they are the masters of ceremony. I like to point out the SCA list herald or tournament herald is the person who, this is what separates a SCA tournament from a kendo match. Because the kendo match, the 2 guys walk out in the fields, the referees, make sure their armors together, they salute each other, which is part of the kendo tradition, and then you fight. On the SCA, we do salutes. We have to salute the host of the tournament. The fighters salute the person who inspires them that day, whether that's their partner or their friend, or a group or a household or whatever. They fight for whoever's honor they are representing, and then they salute each other. Those are the traditional salutes on steel. I know some kingdoms do that a little differently and sometimes in different orders. But the fighters come out to great fanfare, and there's great pomp and circumstance sometimes, and that is the purview of the heralds. And the heralds also, the other thing we do is we are the ones that enact the pairings set up by the list coordinator or the list master. It is the voice herald who will get we get a stack of 3x5 cards, in hand, and we'll go out to the middle of the field and we'll go, fighters, attend for the pairings, and everyone who's there to fight will suddenly come out from under their pavilions or under the shade of the tree or wherever they are, and they'll come right up to you, and you can hear a pin drop when you're doing that. They have come here, some of them have driven hours just to fight that day. That is the reason they're there. They want to know who they're drawing in that round. And we're the ones who will say, so-and-so and so-and-so, or so-and-so is fighting so-and-so, next one, so-and-so is fighting so-and-so. We'll go through the whole set. And then once everyone's got their pairings, I'll give them a minute, just usually about 60 seconds, and they'll be like, Fighter 1 and Fighter 2, please take the field. And I'll call their names out. And then we Fighter 2, Fighter 3 and Fighter 4, please arm yourselves. Fighter 5, Fighter 6, please make ready. And those are, the first 6 fighters, the first pair, know that they need to get up in the field now. And then the next fighters know they need to be standing by, need to have their kit on, their helmets on, ready to step in. And the next pair down knows they need to be standing by, ready to step up, because they're only 2 fights away from their turn. The heralds are the ones that enact the plan. We're out there, we'll get the fighters on the field, we do the salutes, we do pretty much all the ceremony. And sometimes that's just salute, sometimes that's a whole lot more, sometimes it's actually a bridge down to just one gesture and everyone knows what to do, different circumstances. Then the heralds get out of the way. Because we're not fighters. The heralds don't fight. So, and this fighting can't take place on the field if there's non-fighters there. So the heralds get out of the way, and then the fight takes place. As soon as the fight's over, as soon as they decide who the winner is, it's the herald that announces victory 2. We are the PA system for the tournament. And then, of course, most of the time, the victor will announce victory 2, and then we will take the pair of cards that had the fighters' names on them, and we will make sure it gets back to the list coordinator, list master's table, and they'll note on the cards who won or lost. Okay, so we've got the marshals, we've got the list coordinator, we've got the heralds. Is that everyone? No, we still got a few more to go. You have whoever is hosting the tournament. Who is this tournament for? We're not just there to swing sticks. We are there for some sort of a prize, usually a championship. That's going to mean we're fighting in front of a landed noble who is overseeing this, or possibly a member of the royal family. By most, not necessarily all, but most tournaments, you will see some sort of thrones set up with some sort of brass hats, whether that is nobles or royals. But they will be there overseeing the tournament because it is either for them or for someone they're representing that this fight is taking place in the first place. And they are their own entity. The nobles and the royals, that's its own little block unit. That can be as little as one throne with one person on it and water. Or I have seen some throne setups where it is throne, pavilion, or 2 thrones with 2 principals, the pavilion, and 10 or 15 entourage. If it's a big to-do, if it's a major tournament and they're going to be out there for a while, they'll bring a light platoon of support to make sure that everything is taken care of for these people. So that is, if you go to a tournament field, look for that. You will see some sort of oversight of the tournament. And so, so we've got the heralds, we've got the marshals, we've got the hosting entity, whether that is the nobles or the royals. We've got the field. Who else? Well, how about the fighters? I know that sounds like no duh, but if you think about it, some of these tournaments have 15 or 20 fighters in them. And almost all fighters, this isn't bad mouth or complaint, but almost all fighters show up with someone, at least one someone. Now, whether that is a romantic partner, whether that is a friend, whether that is their squire or their man-at-arms, most of the fighters show up with someone else. So that 20 fighters just turned into 40 warm bodies surrounding the field. And that's kind of at a dead minimum. At the last tournament I was at, I know one fighter was there. He was there. His wife was there. His man-at-arms was there. The man-at-arms girlfriend was there. You have this little block. I think there was one other in there. I think it was like 5 of them, 6 of them all told. Now, and I'm not saying that to pick on anyone, but the point is that when we talk about the fighters, each of these fighters is kind of their own little unit unto themselves, their own little support center. And they're going to be camped out usually under a pavilion in shade somewhere. It doesn't matter what the weather is. Where their kit can be laid out when they don't have it on, and hopefully not out in the sun where it gets hot. Even on a cold day, some of those metal parts can get uncomfortably warm if they're in direct sunlight. Sometimes they'll be set out and next to a cooler with drinks for them. They might have some snacks that they brought along for themselves. So my point is that there is a whole infrastructure. It can be very minimal. It can just be one gear bag with a couple of cans of soda on one end, or it can be a fairly elaborate setup. But each fighter kind of brings with them their own little kit, their own little pit crew, if you will, to keep them going through all this. And that needs to be accounted for, because if you walk up to one of these tournament fields, look around, you'll see the guys in armor. And I say guys, we have female fighters, absolutely. I just use the old parlance, but you'll see people in armor. And look around, and you'll see a lot of people with those people in armor, but not in armor themselves. That's part of the fighters' support, as it were. Okay, so we have the fighters. Is that everyone? Nope. Still got a few more to go. We talked about drinks and snacks. Well, we also traditionally have water bearers. Now, what's a water bearer? At the dead minimum, it usually is someone walking around with a squirt water bottle that people can hold up and squirt water in their mouth so they can keep cool. In Ottsdale, or at least up north here in Vindheim, where I'm at, the tradition is usually a little bit more involved. There will be usually about a half dozen to a dozen squirt water bottles with half-strength Gatorade. Something to help balance out the electrolytes. It's usually cold. There's usually filling them out of jugs that are filled with ice first, then water. And then, like I said, half-strength Gatorade to keep from shocking the individual. It took me a while to figure out why they did half-strength Gatorade, but the half-strength was to keep the sweetness of the Gatorade from shocking your system and making you sick, which I've seen happen. We also have a tradition of pickles, pretzels, sometimes fighter biscuits, which I have no idea what goes in fighter biscuits. I've seen them 100 times, though. They're like Bisquick and a few other ingredients, and they're little dry biscuits, which are actually, if you're hungry, they're really good. They fill you up without upsetting your stomach, kind of thing. But we like to come up with nibbles and things that a guy in full kit armor can pick up with his gloved hand or pick up with his gauntlet on, lift his helmet up, shove in his face, get a squirt of water, keep them going. It's not a meal. You don't sit down. These are people who wander around the edge of the field, making sure people are hydrated and making sure if they want something to snack on, they have that food available to them. All right, so we got water bearers. Is that everyone? Are we done? No, because we got someone else too, and that's the audience. And I know the audience sounds like, well, no, duh. Didn't we just talk about that because all the fighters bring their own people? And the fact of the matter is that there are also plenty of people around the tournament field who are not with a fighter, who are not there supporting a particular fighter. These are people who part of their SCA experience is witnessing the fight. For whatever reason, whether it is the ambiance of seeing martial combat, or whether it is supporting the art, even if you don't know anyone particular on the field, or whether they are someone who is a fighter, who's not necessarily fighting that day, who wants to see what the competition looks like. That I've seen fighters not armor up and do that. Some of them may be people who are fighters but can't armor up that day, maybe ill or injured or whatever. But there's a whole bunch of people around that field who are not directly affiliated with fighters, who are there to watch, who are there to enjoy. And they are part of that tournament. They're as much a part of that tournament as the fighters themselves. Now, I know that sounds like a bold thing to say, but if you think about it, first of all, the audience is the reason the marshals are there. Because, like I said, we don't want the fighters and the audience crossing paths when they're swinging. But the other part of it is that honor and glory need an audience. And we talk about there's a lot of talk about the integrity of doing the right thing when no one's watching, and that's valid and that's true and that's very critical from an introspective standpoint. But the reality is that we get all our kits on, we get our helmets on. Some of these people have put hundreds or thousands of dollars into their kits. and they, they've been practicing weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years for these tournaments. And it is important that people see what happens. It is important that when you go out there, people see how you do. So the audience really is part of the tournament experience. It is critical that there are witnesses to see the tournament, to talk about the tournament, to go back to their groups and go, did you see this awesome fight, or how this fighter handled himself? These are essential to the dynamics of the tournament. Could I go on more? Yes. Are there a lot of ifs, thens, and buts in this conversation? Also, yes. Every term I've given you probably has 4 variations of it within my own kingdom, and that's not even counting going into Glen Aubin or Callantyre or Outlands or Attenveld or whatever. There are a lot of variation, and I could spend hours going into those variations. That's not the point. Don't get hung up on the names. I want you to understand that there is an accepted mechanism, an accepted set of turning gears that goes into a tournament. Now, part of that is to make the tournament work. If any of those sound interesting, if any of those sound like, wow, how do they do that? I want you to maybe go look, because I know at least here in Atstiora, I never have enough tournament heralds. Like, no, I don't care if I've got 6 tournament heralds per field. We need another one. Come on out. And usually we legitimately do. If a tournament goes on a long time, I will be tapping out my heralds to get rest, because I don't want them burning out from overexertion. Do you want to learn how to do list coordination? That is absolutely something that you can learn. You don't have to be a fighter to do it. Or maybe you want to be one of the center stage. Maybe you want to be one of the fighters. And now you understand, kind of the mechanism that goes into the SCA tournament. Take that information and use it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the experience. I hope you're able to use it. I'm done babbling. I want you to enjoy your SCA experience, and part of enjoyment comes with understanding. So I hope this helps you better understand the SCA tournament, or the dead minimum. I hope this sparks questions that'll help you better understand how tournaments are run in your area. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you at the next event. Until then, goodbye, and God bless. If there are 2 things I've learned that drive videos these days, it's controversy and engagement. Now, I am never going to fly the controversy flag on a regular basis. It's not what I'm here for. It's not the content I want to make, and I really don't think it helps any of us. But let's do engagement. If you like this video, please go down in the comments and leave a comment. Make sure to share the video, and last but not least, easiest of all, make sure to like the video. That helps drive the algorithm. It helps get the video views and helps promote this material. Thank you very much.